so many different reasons why people stay with their abusers. So I did want to mention that. And just to throw in a little bit of knowledge here, I do want to show this petition for a protective order, just in case anybody out there could be helped or might need this information. So I'm only licensed in North Carolina. I used to be licensed in Virginia, but pretty much in every state, the procedure is very similar if you want to get a protective order against somebody. And most things are available on the internet now. So hopefully you guys can see this. This is the complaint and motion for a domestic violence protective order, also known as a 50B protective order. And this is specific to North Carolina, where you would just fill out the county, the name of the plaintiff versus the defendant, and the defendant's address. And this applies to people who are either spouses, former spouses, persons of the opposite sex who are not married but live together or have lived together, have a child in common, are parent and child, or grandparent and grandchild, are current or former household members, are persons of the opposite sex who are in or have been in a dating relationship. And so here's, like, it basically spells out what you would need to show. You have to show that the defendant has attempted to cause or has intentionally caused me bodily injury, or has placed me or a member of my family or household in fear of imminent serious bodily injury, or in fear of continued harassment that rises to such a level as to inflict substantial emotional distress, or has committed a sexual offense against me in that. And then there's a space where the petitioner or the plaintiff can give some more details. And then you can also potentially check off the defendant has attempted to cause or has intentionally caused bodily injury to the child or children living with me or in my custody, has placed my child or children in fear of imminent serious bodily injury or in fear of continued harassment that rises to such a level as to inflict substantial emotional distress, or has committed a sexual offense against a child or children in that. And then you give specifics. And then the person would also check off, I believe there is danger of serious and immediate injury to me or my child or children. And if there are children involved, you would give information about them. You would also say whether the defendant has any firearms or ammunition, or if the person has used or threatened to use a deadly weapon against me or my minor child or children, or has a pattern of prior conduct involving the use or threatened use of violence with a firearm against any persons, or the defendant has made threats to commit suicide in that blank. So this is the form that basically starts it all. But most of the time, like, people should know that there's a lot of free help available. So if you are the victim of domestic violence and you need to do one of these protective orders, at least where I am, anybody can just go to legal aid. So we have legal aid offices throughout the state. There's one in Raleigh that I'm familiar with, and they will help people with domestic violence protective orders free of charge. And it doesn't even matter what your income level is. So for domestic violence protective orders, at least here in the Raleigh Triangle area, legal aid will help people. So they do have a specific domestic violence protective order office. It's on the 5th floor of the Wake County Courthouse in downtown Raleigh. So they have the paperwork available. There's no filing fee, and you can get an attorney to assist you through legal aid for free. And so that's why usually when people hire private attorneys like myself, it's usually because they want to defend themselves against a domestic violence protective order. So I have been involved in cases where I was defending the person accused of being abusive. And, it's definitely like an interesting courtroom. In Wake County, they only have one courtroom and a judge that is it's typically the same judge most of the time who sits there listening to domestic violence cases day in and day out. And I don't know how they do that, because I think it is really tough and emotionally draining. And you have to pay attention to so many nuances and details. And you have to be able to look at the people on the stand and assess their credibility, because usually, it's one person saying this happened and then the other person denies it and tries to blame the other person. So it's only in some cases where there might be witnesses or photographs or some slam dunk type of case. And in cases that are more slam dunk, especially if there are attorneys involved, usually the defendant will just agree to what's called a consent order, where they agree that they're going to stay away from the person and not harass them. And, there are other conditions that they can agree to. They can also go ahead and agree to certain things like child support or child custody issues too within the domestic violence courtroom. So that's the procedure in a very quick nutshell. I don't know if anybody has any more specific questions about that, but the procedures definitely do vary from state to state. So this is just some very general information about the procedures as I know it here in North Carolina. Yeah, so this form is available on the internet, and I'm just assuming in any other state, you can probably just Google domestic violence protective order and whatever your state name is or your county is, and the form is probably easily available on the internet. Yeah. So yes, this is the same thing as a restraining order. So there is a different form in North Carolina that they use for what's called a 50C protective order. And 50C is for people that are not in a romantic relationship. So that would be a totally different form that you can also find on the internet at nccourts.org. So this form is specifically for people who either were or are currently in some sort of dating relationship or have kids between them. Yeah, but when people say restraining order, sometimes they also mean just, getting at someone who's harassing them that they never actually had a romantic relationship with. Yeah, but that's all within the same courtroom, at least where I am in Wake County, North Carolina. So the process is that you would fill out that petition to initially try to get a temporary restraining or protective order against the other person. So the petitioner still has to go into the courtroom, wait around for a while until the judge has time to hear the person. And then the person says, what's happened, ideally what's happened most recently to cause the person to feel like they need a protective order. And normally if the person presents decently and has a compelling story, normally the judge will at least go ahead and issue what's called an ex parte order. That means that the other party is not present, but the judge is going to temporarily give you a domestic violence protective order until the time that a hearing can take place. So the hearing typically takes place within 10 days later, after the sheriff has time to go and serve the defendant with the papers and the allegations against him or her. Then you have to come back to court again to have that real hearing where the other party might have an attorney defending him or her. And you have to put forth evidence, and then the judge will decide then and there, if the judge is convinced or not that there needs to be a protective order. And usually the protective orders last for a year, although sometimes they are for 6 months. And the courthouse that I normally practice in, we also have a voluntary domestic violence custody program, which is where attorneys like myself, I volunteered for it. We volunteer to help people who have custody situations that also need to be sorted out while the parties have a domestic violence protective order going on between them. So in pretty much all the cases that I've volunteered with, we were always able to settle the custody cases, which makes the judges really happy, because then the judge doesn't have to decide on it, because sometimes two people can't get along, or they might have been fighting or threatening each other or whatever, but yet the other person still wants to be able to see their child and not be shut out from the family for a whole entire year while the protective order is done. So luckily, in all the cases I've been involved in, through having volunteer attorneys representing each side and going back and forth trying to hammer out some sort of visitation schedule, we've always been able to settle the cases sort of amicably. Yeah. So, but it definitely helps if there wasn't actual, like a whole horrible, beat down or whatever. Sometimes the Child Protective Services also is involved if the violence happened in front of the child or the children too. So definitely a lot of issues and fact-specific things kind of determine whether a case can be resolved or resolved through a consent order, or whether you just have to go in front of the judge and have the judge decide whether there really was domestic violence going on or not. Yeah. So let's try to share a screen here. This one has to do, it was a very nice obituary that I found. And another thing that I hadn't mentioned before was that shortly before Chiquita Tate was murdered, she was being interviewed by a local news channel for maybe some sort of segment about a case she was involved in. And then towards the end, she said something slightly weird, where the reporter asked her, "What is your name again?" Chiquita Tate. And she said something like, "Chiquita, like the banana. And be sure to add hyphen Harris at the end, because if I don't do that, then my husband's going to have a fit." So, later on, people picked up on that and said, yeah, this was a sign that she was a little afraid of Greg Harris, that he was a control freak, which is what, his former girlfriends and his ex-wife later also allegedly said about him too. So that was kind of sad to hear that from Miss Tate after what happened. So this is her nice obituary here, and we'll just end with that, where it says, "A resident and native of Baton Rouge, our beloved sister, aunt, cousin, and friend, attorney Chiquita Patrice Tate Harris, passed away on Friday, February 20th, 2009. She was born on October 15th, 1975. She attended school in East Baton Rouge until the 11th grade, when she moved to and graduated from high school in Chicago. She graduated from Clark Atlanta University in Atlanta, where she earned a bachelor's degree in English and moved back to Baton Rouge to pursue her Juris Doctorate degree from Southern University Law Center. She was sworn in as an attorney in October 2004 and began her solo practice concentrating in the field of criminal law in January 2005. Prior to going to law school, she worked as a teacher with the Timbuktu Academy at Southern University and as a legal assistant for Judge Pamela Taylor Johnson. So later on, you can also find this through Google, but later on, Judge Pamela Taylor Johnson wrote a nice essay about Chiquita Tate for Essence magazine, just talking about what a wonderful person Chiquita was and how Chiquita showed up to try to interview for a position with her and had organized her whole entire desk and was answering phone calls and really impressed the judge as a student. So it says, "Attorney Tate was loved and adored by all she met. She fought hard and diligently for her clients. In her short career, she was successful in getting justice for many of her criminal clients and was also successful in getting a $500,000 award in a personal injury case. Her tenacity, brevity, and plethora of knowledge will always be remembered by those who were fortunate enough to know her. She touched the lives of so many people. The community has lost a jewel. She was a member of the local chapter of the NAACP, American Bar Association, Criminal Defense Lawyers Association, Baton Rouge Bar Association, Louis A. Martinet Legal Society, and the Alcohol and Beverage Control Board, where she had been recently elected as an assistant chairwoman." So it talks about how, her father was still alive. She had 6 sisters and brothers, a lot of nieces and nephews. And so anyway, just a very sad story. And I hope, people learn, or, the takeaway is that domestic violence can affect people of all backgrounds, even people who seem to be well-educated professionals. Even if someone looks like they're having a happy relationship or perfect marriage, you never know what's going on behind the scenes. So if you or anyone that you know, or any of your loved ones, are facing issues of domestic violence, definitely try to help them or ask them to seek help, and definitely, it probably isn't a good idea to let the abusive person know that you're planning on leaving them. Just don't give um, any advance warning. I don't think that's a good idea, especially if the person has already shown a pattern of being abusive or having anger management or control issues. It's better to be safe than sorry. So with that, I guess I'll end the live stream for today. Thank you guys so much for joining in on a Friday night to discuss a serious topic. Hopefully my next video or next live stream will be more like happy, funny, or uplifting type of theme. So hope you guys all have a great weekend, and may Chiquita Patrice Tate rest in peace. She won't be forgotten.